Welcome to today's podcast. Today's a special podcast because of an experience that I just had on Thursday. I'm wearing this Houston Rockets hat because one of the players that came up through Rhythm Dribble was just drafted into the NBA. Cam Whitmore, who was eventually drafted 20th, I felt like while for him it was an exhilarating time and all of the attention ought to be focused on him, I've got to be honest enough to understand that that was a culminating event in my career in preparing children for exceptional heights in basketball. I think you'd agree that this is a culminating event to sit at the 2023 NBA draft and not just sit there, but sit in the war room with the family. I enjoyed every second of it. I thought it was more intense than I would have imagined, but nonetheless, I really enjoyed it. I was very fortunate because I went with the Whitmore family and they were gracious in the invitation, extending the invitation. I immediately said yes, so you guys can imagine the feeling after having watched these NBA drafts lifelong and then finally having the opportunity to attend one. This is not my first NBA basketball player that I helped to get to move through the process, but this is my first time sitting in the war room, in the green room, and experiencing the things that go on in there. If you could imagine what it's like to be in a room with 20 of the best, then you'd know exactly how I felt. It was exhilarating, but intense. And the deeper that I went into the event, the more I knew that I had to get out of there and get back behind this microphone and offer some value to the listeners. I thought Adam Silver did a great job of welcoming the players into the NBA. We sat atop the Rockefeller building in the middle of Manhattan, and the skyline looks totally different there. If you've never seen it, you have to Google it. It's the Rainbow Room, and there's a history behind it. It was built decades ago, almost a century ago now. And at the time it sat, as they explained it, it sat as one of the highest restaurants in the country, and it overlooks Manhattan on three sides. And that's something I won't forget, and this was well before we were able to get to the draft. We started our day around before noon, where the NBA would push us through their draft process. And it wasn't all about sitting in the war room early in the day. It was about getting the families together under one roof and explaining to them some of what they could expect during this transition into the NBA family. And I got a chance to experience that. I thought the NBA, being a stakeholder in this, I thought that they put on a class act of a process. I thought that the NBA knew very clearly that they had to give us advice going in, and this was a great start to it. I thought that they made families feel comfortable in the transition. I thought it made families feel special. It was obvious that there was a transition. We were going through a door in our basketball journeys. And they wanted to make certain that they understood that we were partners in this, that there was support in place for it all. And that was as important to him as it was to the families. That's important because we sometimes don't know the relationships that exist between NBA executives and the players. But I'm here to tell you at the onset, it's very, very welcoming and very, very, very warm. I thought Adam Silver, when he was addressing these players, I thought he did a wonderful job of telling players that you have a voice. Each player, as they mature, is going to make a distinguishable decision about what's important to them and what's unimportant to them. And the advice that he gave them was that once you know what's important to you, leverage the exposure, leverage the power of the NBA to get across. In other words, social media really, really takes a liking to NBA players. So leverage the reach of the NBA, leverage the reach of social media to be able to speak about the things that are important. By doing so, you're impacting the world. You're creating a legacy. He didn't seek to control what would be important to each individual basketball player in there. But he did say, when you decide what's important to you, have a voice about it because people are going to listen to you. And he just helped to prepare them for that impact. Day one, first introduction. And I thought that was solid as can be. From there, we ate lunch, took pictures with Adam Silver, and then we moved on to prepare for the draft. Once we were in the war room, inside of the Barclays Center, we saw the NBA process at work. The process associated with the NBA draft is a little bit more detailed than we think it is. It's not they announce a name and then the media runs over to the player late on arrival, having missed some of the emotional responses to their name being called. It's not that. It's not that there's a camera at every table waiting for somebody's name to be called. That's not the process. Historically, I thought that the real work of the draft was done by the NBA, but no, they set up the process, right? They're not in the way. They're not the ones that say we want this player. No, I didn't feel that way. I get the impression that the NBA GMs are fast at work for weeks and months, leading up to the minutes and seconds when they're on the clock when it comes to picking a basketball player. So I have a real new respect for that process. The cameras have to anticipate where to be. It can't happen once the name is called. There's not enough time for that. So this successful process seems like the call comes down and the camera people begin to start to move in the direction of the person's name that's going to be called. And that becomes nerve-wracking for families because you get to see who the next person is before the name is called, and that person may not be you. So inside of the green room, we get to see that, no, it's not us this time. No, it's not us this time. So you can imagine that gets more and more difficult as the process moves on. So this intensity is authentic in there. Very, very, very tense environment. Again, not just entertainment. We're picking players that are going to impact our organization from now into the future. So I see the anxiety, I see the decision making that's associated with the next basketball player. What's good is that when the name is finally called, there's this exhilaration, right? Finally, the wait is over. Those are the things that come clear immediately. Solid NBA process. I take my hat off to the NBA for their understanding that this has to be seamless. And I enjoyed watching them at work as the night went on. All in all, you walk away from the NBA process with high-level respect for the amount of care and concern that the NBA has for its players and the NBA's need to put on a quality product for the families that are associated with it and the fans that are to watch it. And I take my hat off to the NBA for the production that they were able to put on the other day, on Thursday. The NBA teams is another real stakeholder. You see it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's clear that the NBA teams put in a lot of work to choose the player that they want. They are working sometimes years in advance, certainly months and weeks and days. But I see them still working minutes and seconds before the pick comes out. So I take my hat off to NBA teams for the amount of work that they put in to vet a player, to choose the player that's going to help their franchise move forward. So I really appreciated watching the NBA teams at work, watching them work the phones through the agents, working the constant contact of players. And I take my hat off to the NBA teams as well. The next stakeholder I thought was the players. And they had to have been the most impressive because they're young and they are focused in the moment while still trying to have fun. They're busy, right? Their schedule is as jam-packed as a movie star in terms of having to be where they have to be. In fact, when I got to Manhattan, the first thing I saw was Cam Whitmore's picture on one of the buildings, and makes you emotional because what I know is the work that was required to get there. This event marks the culmination of major work, major sacrifice that the average child in many cases can't relate to. If you weren't in the gym during this preparation process, sometimes you don't know the amount of work that went into it. And that's unfortunate because I'm telling you that a lot of work has gone into it and they deserve every bit of attention that they get. So it was wonderful to see that part of the process where they're showered. They're showered and they're expected to be satisfied and people are waiting on them hand and foot. And I think that's the best part of the process. So I take my hat off to players who have to get into the war room and endure that level of scrutiny. And then in the end, to be able to have that level of satisfaction. So I really appreciate players. I have a new respect for players. My own sons have gone through their own process. One landing in the NBA. So I thought that was wonderful to see it from two different vantage points. The next set of stakeholders that I thought was worth mentioning was the families themselves. Parents had to control the anxiety of the child, be a support mechanism. Parents had to quell their own anxiety during this process. Parents had to interact because, as Adam Silver said, they're part of the family now. we were all part of the NBA family instantaneously when we embarked on this journey together on Thursday. The families, again, you really see a lot of tears, a lot of emotion, a lot of solid and sound advice. But all in all, everyone had their support system there. I just think that they have, as families, they have put so much work in. And I know it because on my end, I know the amount of work that goes in it. But the families put so much work, so you have so much respect for the families in that particular moment. They're patient, they're strong. And again, you end up taking your hat off to the families for what they're enduring on that particular night. The next stakeholder that I thought was very, very, very important in this process was coaches and agents, and I'll identify them together. I went throughout life thinking that the agent did all the work. After seeing the process, I think it's a little bit different. I think the NBA teams do a heck of a lot of work, and I think the players do a heck of a lot of work as well in order to create the bridge between player and team. But I think NIL must have changed these things, because I was surprised to see the relationships that exist between agencies and coaches, because it's not just agent at this level. You see all hands on deck. I was with Cam's agent, and it was a well-oiled machine, just in terms of everybody enjoys the work, everybody knows the importance of the work, everybody's on board, the spirit is solid, the culture is solid. So you get the impression that the same way GMs and coaches look to create a culture in a locker room, it seems that the best agencies have built a culture within itself, and the players get to benefit from it, and they can relate to it. They know when they're around a good system, a good process, and good people. And that's what I was able to see. But the interaction between agencies and coaches was unique to me. And I can only imagine that when there's an NIL deal at stake, that they are able to go and communicate with coaches and the athletic directors and people within the school. So seems like there's this need, that there's this relationship, this concomitant relationship that exists between the two entities. And that was on full display. I just felt like it was one big family in the case of the agencies and their players. And that was exhilarating to watch, especially because I didn't anticipate it. So I really, really, really appreciated that. What message can I bring back to trainees who have the goals of getting to the NBA? And I appreciate that, especially because I have to take the information from this new experience called the NBA drafts, where I get to hear the advice, where I get to see the excitement. So what it does is motivate me to get back home and get back in the gym, so I can communicate what I saw, so I can give advice in terms of, if you want this, then this is what they look like, because everybody has a chance. And I was able to see that immediately, because the players come in all shapes and sizes, just like the trainees do. The question is, are you willing to give up enough in order to become relevant enough to where you become a part of this NBA draft process? That's the real question I think that they have to answer. So when I come back, I tell them that the goal is realistic. I see it. They don't look much different than you guys. The problem is that you have to get your skill level up to par. You have to get your skill level up to a level to where it becomes valuable to an NBA team. And that's no easy task. That's difficult. But I think through development. I think through motivation, I think that you guys can get there. But the question has to be, what am I willing to give up? Parents of these trainees, support them. They're not as far off as we may think. Give them everything you got. Find that trainer and begin to ask the real and relevant questions. What do I need to do in order to get there? Those answers are real. And then once they're able to articulate them, then you have to go back to your son or daughter and you have to be able to tell them that this is what it takes. This is my role. This is your role. Let's go get it. And it's at that moment that the journey really, really begins high level. Again, I come back from this experience and leverage my years of work in the gyms preparing players. Like I said, I have enough kids in college, 31 in Division I in the last 10 years, up from 26. Each year gets better and better. 4 pros. My second son is entering into the G League now. I just think you have to ask the question, why can't it be me? Find the support. I can help you guys find that support because it's as important to me that you guys get to your goals as it is to you. Use your resources. Cam and I and his family have spoken about how can we make this dream come true for others? How can we reach back into the communities and make this affordable? Those are all priorities going forward. How can I come out of my comfort zone a bit and begin to start to help people to their goals? I think those are all things that I'm willing to do. And I just hope that this experience is enough for people to understand that this dream is certainly possible. Again, my plan is to begin to start to give real and relevant information to parents and trainees to help to push you guys forward in terms of reaching your goals. So I'm committed. So hopefully you guys have the same level of commitment. Thanks for tuning in, and there'll be more of me on the internet as a part of my commitment to help you guys begin to grow. Again, your success is my success, and you guys have a good night. I'll see you guys next time.